Hello and welcome to the first episode of the World Wanderers podcast. I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts. Today, this is the first episode, but it's really going to be more like an episode 0. We're going to talk about ourselves a lot. We're both narcissists, so a lot about ourselves. And then we might get to some stuff about traveling, specifically long-term traveling or backpacking, what experiences we've had with it, how it has changed us, and why we think you should do it. But first, let's introduce ourselves. Amanda, do you want to start?
Sure, I'd love to start. As I said before, my name's Amanda. I grew up in Cochrane, Alberta, which is about half an hour outside of Calgary, Alberta. I lived there until 2007 when I moved to Calgary. Big 30-minute move into the city. I went to the University of Calgary and I studied business with a major in marketing. And after I graduated university was really when I started to find my passion for travel. So that's sort of a little bit about me. What about you?
Yeah, to catch up to that point, I grew up in BC, in the middle of BC, in a small town called Naramata. And then I moved to Calgary to go to university, also to study business. And that's where I ran into Amanda.
We casually bumped into each other.
Yeah.
We've been friends ever since.
Yeah. And then, so during university, we started to date, and then we both kind of came to the decision that we wanted to travel somehow. And then, so we went on our first trip together in 2011, immediately after graduating university.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about that trip a little bit?
Yeah, sure. But first, we'll talk about just the last 3 years of our lives. So we've been on 2 6-month trips with 2 years of boring work sandwiched in the middle.
A little bit of an unexcitement period in our lives.
Yeah. What I think I said before, 2 adventures and an anti-adventure.
Yeah, definitely an anti-adventure.
But it was still a learning experience.
For sure. I think that everything you do in your life is, you can't be like, oh, I regret those 2 years. It's like maybe our last trip wouldn't have been as great without that anti-adventure in there.
Yeah. So we've traveled together for 12 months in 2 really long trips. We've been to, I think, close to 40 countries on those trips.
Yeah, I think we hit 40 countries together.
Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia. What's
Zealand.
that continent that Australia is part of? Oceania?
Australasia. I don't really know what that continent is.
And then South America. Our most recent trip, we just got back from a week ago.
Week and a half now.
Yeah, slowly fading away. Was all around South America for 6 months.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was brilliant. So first of all, why don't we talk about why we wanted to go traveling in the first place? What's the genesis of our first long-term trip?
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
So for me, I grew up in a family that traveled quite a bit. I was really fortunate that my parents took me on my first trip when I was in grade 3. So I was, 8 years old maybe. And we always did very family travel. So Disneyland, Disney World, Mexico, Hawaii, those types of things. But I loved it from a small age. I was eager to get the travel book every year and look at which hotel I wanted to stay at.
What's the travel book?
You used to be able to go to a travel agent and get magazines, and you could basically pick out your hotel from a magazine. And so you'd get a travel book of the Caribbean. So it'd have Mexico, Cuba, Dominican, Jamaica, all those things. And you could it would show what sort of stuff the hotel had. So for me, I was always looking at which one had the coolest pool, which one had the best kids activities. I don't know if any of those companies still do that, but that was definitely where it was at when I was in my early teens, even 11, 12 years old.
Yeah. So you did a lot of traveling.
Yeah, I traveled quite a bit with my family. So I was very fortunate in that. But then when I decided to go to university right after high school, I made myself a promise that I was going to travel after I graduated because I didn't want to find my dream job and get stuck in that place and then never travel because I really did want to see more of the world.
Kind of a weird thing to say, get stuck in your dream job.
Yeah, I know. It's completely wrong. And now that I've worked in a new grad position. I understand that there's basically no new grads that are stepping into their dream job, in air quotes.
Well,
I mean, you
I
don't
think
even know what your dream job is at that point.
when you say get stuck in my dream job, I think it means you're not really believing that your dream job is that great. So it's not that much of a dream job.
Or I'm not believing that there is a dream job for me in an office, perhaps. What about for you? What was sort of your motivation to travel?
I don't know where. I think it's a pretty common idea to go traveling after university.
For sure.
Not that many people do it, but it's a fairly common idea. Like you watch movies like Eurotrip, stuff like Eurotrip, Road Trip. Things
Disclaimer, our trip to Europe was not like Eurotrip.
Yeah, no.
In case anybody out there is expecting a Euro trip in the weeks to come, that's not what it was.
Yeah, no twins made out. That's what happened on that movie, right? They were twins.
A lot of things happened in Euro trip.
Yeah.
We could spend all day talking about that.
Anyways, so then my brother had planned to go traveling after university. Mm-hmm. So that was something that made me want to do it too.
It was part of your motivation.
I hadn't traveled. Yeah, I hadn't traveled that much with my family. So I know it's kind of weird, but it kind of bothered me when people would talk about all these cool places they'd been, specifically in Europe. And I hadn't been to any of them. So part of it for me was like, I want to go to all these places. It'd be cool. I would be cool if I had gone to all of these other places.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, with the way that the media is these days, not the media, social media is, you're updating constantly. So it's cool to have that profile picture from, you know, in front of the Eiffel Tower. It's cool to be the first of your friends to see the Colosseum. It's cool to, you know, upload those photos, tweet from a cool location, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's part of it for sure. Mm-hmm. It makes you feel good in kind of a base way.
And how did you feel on the job front? Were you...
So that's another thing. There's a lot of anxiety when you're graduating university and trying to make a transition into the work world. And that's something I had been nervous about because I had always worked outside my field of study. So I was kind of nervous about, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a job in the field I studied. So just skipping that process entirely was pretty gratifying. As everyone else was looking for jobs and panicking about it, I was just like, oh, whatever. Like, I'm going traveling. Like, fuck you all.
Like, my life's better than yours. Enjoy your...
It's most stressful. It's like a good escape, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of say that traveling is like running away. What do you sort of think about that?
Yeah, well, I think... Well, when you travel, so we should define traveling first when we're talking about traveling. I don't think vacationing is running away as much. But when we're talking about traveling, we're specifically referring to long-term traveling, backpacking.
Hostels, budget food.
Yeah, more like, the hosteling most of the time.
I think hostels, guest house are like low-budget hotels. Like, it's definitely, I mean, in terms of the way that I see my parents... as they're starting to travel places outside of North America, they travel completely different to the way that I define travel now. Mm-hmm. I don't even define travel as what I did as a child, going for a week to an all-inclusive resort.
I think it's vacationing versus traveling.
For sure, 100%. You're not really like eating the real food. You're not getting like a real experience in a country. Yeah. I mean, you're taking a break from your life wherever you live, but you're not really traveling.
And I think you can vacation for 2 months.
Oh, for sure.
Or you could travel for 2 months.
And I mean, I think that everybody has a different preference in how they want to, you know, travel, vacation, whatever it is. And I think for me, like, I'm fine with whatever other people want to do, but I like to travel in the way that we just defined it.
Yeah. So for me, there was some kind of base reasons for wanting to travel. Like, I want to be places that other people haven't been. That'll make me feel good about myself. But also there was some... I felt like it would be a good opportunity for personal growth for me. Mm-hmm. I was really in that state of mind coming out of university. I remember I was just looking at my journal from 2011 and I wrote that I want to take the time that I have. It's 6 months of not free time. Well, I guess free time. Like, you can choose specifically what you want to do with it. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to take that time for personal growth, specifically working on becoming a better communicator. So not being shy and awkward talking to people.
Yeah, I think that's one thing too. When we got back, a lot of people, that we knew from home, friends and family and stuff, complimented you on that. Like, wow, Ryan's really, a lot more open to conversation, talking a lot more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is social skills are skills. It's not something you just have naturally. So
no, for sure. You learn them as a child. And I mean, if you don't learn them as a child, or there's something that prevents you from feeling like you can speak up, you have to teach yourself as an adult. And travel is definitely a great way to learn those skills.
Yeah, because so much of communication, not necessarily through childhood, but communication really does become kind of something forced. Like, you're at work, you have to talk to people. You're at school, you have to talk to people. So I think a lot of it becomes unconscious.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of, I think, forced communication in society. I mean, how many times have you been in a job and you work with that person who's like, you just don't really click with them, yet you eat lunch with them every single day? And it's like, why do I eat lunch with this person when I don't really want to communicate with them? But it's like, you don't have any choice.
Yeah, you're afraid to hurt their feelings or something like that.
Or you're afraid to be that person who's like, you know what, guys, like, I want to eat lunch by myself, and go sit at a table by yourself and read the newspaper or book. Like, people don't really do that. It takes a very, very strong person to do that.
I wouldn't always necessarily say strong.
Yeah.
A person who's like really afraid of talking to other people, or maybe a person who's a strong person.
Yeah, for sure.
So did you have any personal growth objectives for going traveling?
Going into it, I don't really think that I set any personal growth goals for myself. I mean, I really was like wanting to see the world, avoid the job thing. I think now that I've done a lot of personal growth, I was definitely doing some running away from Calgary, where I grew up. I was trying to get away from, I don't even know how to put it. Just trying to find myself.
Yeah.
I really needed to explore me, because I mean, my parents grew up in Calgary. As you know, I have a ton of family in Calgary. It's very much like I live in this world that's been very laid out for me. And my parents have never moved away. My parents got married young, and it was kind of always, as I was brought up, that would be my life. And I was very I pushed back against that. And then after going to school in Calgary, I was like, I really can't be in Calgary anymore. Like, it's too much Calgary. Like, I need to find me. And so I think traveling was my way of doing that. And I don't think I ever outlined that for myself. I think that was a very unconscious thing for me in 2011. And it's a lot more clear to me 3 years later that that's what I needed and what I was doing. I think there was a few other things. Like, I was really bad with my phone. So, not having a phone for 6 months was good. I really got to see who my good friends were, the people who actually made an effort to communicate with me and to keep in touch with me and that sort of thing. I think travel is always good for that, because there's people who really just like to be friends with people who are convenient to them. Mm-hmm. And at home, a lot of the times I am convenient to people because I make time for people, and, sometimes I put myself aside for other people. And it's hard when you go away and you expect that from those people and they don't give it to you because you're not convenient to them anymore. So I had a lot of growing like that, just sort of understanding myself, understanding other people, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think you're going to learn things traveling without wanting to learn them. Like, you don't need to have an intention going in necessarily to come away with takeaways. I think, like, a lot of the things I learned while traveling weren't things I necessarily thought about going into traveling. For instance, when you go into a hostel, you're meeting so many new people, and when you're in high school, university, you kind of unconsciously are playing a social game where you make assumptions about people and you choose how you're going to associate based off how those people are going to affect your social standing.
For
a lot
sure.
of people do that. Some people don't, but a lot of people do. In general, that's, I think, the way high school works, especially a little bit less in university. But when you go into hostel, you see someone, you make assumptions about them. You're going to talk to them anyways because you talk to everyone in your room. And that way you really have to challenge your assumptions.
Yeah, for sure. I remember, we'll talk a little bit more about this in our coming episodes, but just people that we hung out in the first week of our travels with in Iceland and London. I remember being like, there is absolutely no way I would have associated myself with these people in Calgary.
But not like there's no way I would have associated these people.
But by
like
choice.
A negative, no, but not like, oh, I'm unhappy to be associating with them now. It's just like, like this is way outside of my normal circle of friends.
Yeah, no, what I'm trying to say is like, they're the type of people that I would have looked at and been like, oh, I can't be friends with them because they don't dress like me. Their hair is not like mine. They don't do their makeup like me, for something very external. But then you're in a hostel room and it's awkward if you don't talk to people. So you talk to them and you're like, oh, you're really cool. And it's very much, I know people always say, don't judge a book by its cover, but that's how high school is. That's what you do. You dress like your friends and you start dressing like certain people to be a part of that social circle, or at least for females a ton. I think it is the same for males. But in hostels, it's not like that. You have really good conversation with people that you never, on the outside, that you may not have expected to ever connect with.
And you learn a lot of new things because you're dealing with, there is like a type of person who's traveling, but I think it's more of a wide range than you'd expect to find like in a business school, for example. In a business school, people are fairly cut from the same cloth, a lot of people. But yeah, so I think challenging assumptions, it's not just with people, but in terms of, I guess it's still in terms of people, but like stereotypes, generalities. Like you leave your country for the first time, really, like when you're going. I don't know, I'd been to Australia with my family before, but it's felt like the first time I was leaving the country. And
it's also like when you only leave the country for a week or two, you still have Canadian currency in your pocket. You're still holding on to this like nationalistic.
Yeah, so you're not really associating too deeply with people from other cultures. That's the thing about traveling. You go to Europe and you meet a whole bunch of people who aren't from Europe because they're all traveling Europe. And then you go to somewhere else and you meet a whole bunch of Europeans because they're all traveling there.
Yeah.
But you do associate with people from a very wide range of nationalities. And it really brings down this view that's promoted. Even somewhere in Canada, there's this like, oh, we're humble thing going on. But it is something that people use that to make themselves feel good. It's like, oh, I'm Canadian. That means I start at I'm a bit of a better person.
Yeah. It's weird though, because people reinforce that. I remember
people reinforce that
we've met so many people like, oh, you're from the States? No, we're from Canada. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And like, it's fine. It doesn't matter. Like, it's just a border.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, you're from Canada? You're so nice. And like, you haven't even talked to me. I could be a complete bitch. You don't even know. I mean, I like to think I'm nice, but people make those, they give us very much like a good reputation before they even know us.
Yeah, but when you're associating with a whole bunch of people from a whole bunch of different countries, it really makes you realize that this whole idea that like I am a certain thing because of the government that controls the boundaries around me, it kind of makes that whole idea come crashing down fairly quickly.
Yeah, no, for sure. I completely agree.
Another thing is it kind of makes me notice, you notice like how unconscious a lot of people's behaviors are, and what I'm referring to is trends. Like
trends. I thought you said trans. I was like trans what?
Trannies. Like when you notice the trannies. No. When you notice the trends, like you see people doing all these stupid things because other people in those countries are doing those things, and if you aren't getting that social pressure, you're really like, what's going on here? Why are these people all wearing MC Hammer pants?
Yeah, there is definitely. And I mean, for me, like I like to kind of keep up with the trends when I'm in Canada, and it's like, it's weird when you're socializing with people from different countries because the trends are different everywhere. So it's like you know, this thing that I've bought in Canada that I've taken traveling with me. I mean, let me use Lululemon, for example. So I'm wearing Lululemon right now. I grocery shop in Lululemon. I work out in Lululemon. I watch movies in Lululemon. Like, that's what we do in Canada. You know?
That's what some people do in Canada.
That's what most people do.
It's more common. It's not what we do in Canada.
A lot of people my age, that's what you would do in Canada. You hang out in Lululemon. You do your grocery shopping in Lululemon. And I find traveling, it's like I go to the airport in my Lululemon and I'm like looking like an idiot because in other cultures, people dress up for airplanes. And they're like looking at me like, what are you doing? Like, are you planning to lift weights on the on the plane ride? Are you planning to lift weights on the bus? And it's like, what are you doing? Like, why don't you just throw some runners and some leggings on? Like, we're taking a flight.
Yeah.
But you very much like, you stop worrying so much about like, oh, what am I going to wear? Like, is it weird that I'm wearing this? Does this look weird together? It's like, okay, like this is clean out of my backpack. I'm going to throw it on.
It's funny noticing traveling because when we did it, we'd kind of be moving hostel to hostel. When you're in hostels, I find it's not really an issue. What I'm referring to is clothing, like you have a limited selection of clothing. So then for example, we stopped in Greece to do an island hopping tour for 14 days. So then you're with the same group of people for 14 days in a row. And by day 3, you're like, shit, like I only have 4 t-shirts. Like how come I didn't think about this for the last 3 months? But it doesn't even concern you that you wear the same shirt, 3 times a week, maybe 3 days in a row. But as soon as you start hanging around people, then it's like, oh crap, I don't have other clothing.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you before. I was going to say for me, it's like I unpack, a t-shirt, a cardigan, pair of pants or shorts, and like a pair of shoes. I take those out of my backpack. So I've taken them out of their like little compartments in my backpack, and I'm probably going to wear them all 3 days that we're in that place because it's way easier than getting more stuff out. And I don't care.
Yeah. So you start to notice how much of your action is externally driven instead of internally driven. You realize that you're picking clothing not because you want to wear it, but because of a specific fear, in a way, of people, your social group, the place you are. Yeah, so you really start to notice all the social pressures that influence you. The same social pressures like really do play a role before you go traveling too.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the decision to go traveling, a lot of people, I think it depends on the country for sure. Like we've met a lot of Australians who it seems they're very open to the idea of long-term travel.
I think
but Canadians, like even
too,
before you go, you hear things like, oh, it's going to be harder to find a job after you've traveled for 6 months. Like, oh, it's going to look bad on your resume.
Oh, what are you going to do about that gap on your resume? Yeah, it's not a gap on my resume. It's 6 months of personal growth that I did.
And it is more
seeing the world.
There's a lot of fear as well.
There's also a lot of like everybody puts in their opinions. It's like, oh, you're going here, like that's weird. Oh, you're going here, like that's a dangerous country.
Well, so yeah, there's certain countries where it's like people know enough. There's a tipping point of people who know people who have gone. And then there's other countries where these like ideas, like, so for example, older people, when you tell them you're going to Thailand now, it's like Thailand seems fairly accepted as a place to go.
Colombia though?
So this time specifically Colombia, people have like, oh, you're going to get kidnapped. Oh, watch out. Even South America in general, a lot of like negative views of Latin America because all you hear here is bad things about Latin America.
Except Peru. If you're like, oh, I'm going to South America, people are like, oh, Peru, Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
And I mean, after
it's funny because going
South
is
America, that's where everybody, all the like vacationers are, that's where all like the older, people who are more wealthy on a smaller vacation are is in Peru.
And it's not any safer than any of the other countries, really.
No, it's not.
I don't have crime statistics in front of me, but as far as going there and feeling it, like it seems like we heard a bunch of stories about people getting robbed in taxis more in Peru than in Colombia or anywhere else like that.
Yeah. I remember I had to go in to sign a form before we left in January to change over my car insurance so that I could leave my car. And the lady was like, oh, where are you flying to? And I was like, oh, Bogota in Colombia. And her eyes went wide, her mouth dropped, and she was just like, oh my God. And it was like, pretty much like, good luck. I'm never going to see you again.
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe do you want some life insurance while you're here? And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, I got a similar reaction at the airport checking in for my flight in like Kelowna, BC, small airport. And the lady's like, oh, you're going to Bogota. Like, oh, like, kind of good luck. I don't remember what she said. But so many people will just, they just regurgitate these things, these views they have without even thinking about them. And so it puts it makes it feel like I think people unconsciously are trying to make you afraid to go in a way.
Well, they're putting like their fears on you. I mean, somebody's probably like, okay, I've heard it's bad. Like, I'm scared to go, but like, oh, I'm kind of like jealous that they're brave enough to go and like see for themselves, but I'm going to try and make them scared. It's kind of
like
that
they're putting their
unconscious
rationalizations on you. Like they maybe wanted that too.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard not to let that influence you because you're like, oh, am I making like a bad decision?
Yeah. Yeah. But so it becomes a hard choice to go traveling, which is funny because it's like an instant gratification choice in my head. It's like, oh yeah, like I'm going traveling. This is going to be awesome. But then a lot of people treat it like it's a hard decision as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you think it was a hard decision at all, or was it very like an easy decision for you?
It was an easy decision, but there was kind of like a lurking part of my brain that thought it was a bad decision.
More specifically for our trip in 2011 or for 2014?
Probably 2014. I feel like it was more. I was able to say like, oh, we'll come back from traveling and find a job. It won't be a problem. This time, I don't know. You read things about. I read specifically an article talking about how people who miss more than 3 months of work or are unemployed for a period of 3 months or longer in their 20s lose something like or end up with 15% less maximum career earnings or something like that. And it's funny because it's
how much do you care?
No, but it's I don't know. So what that
I'm just wondering, like, so you read that, like, what do you think about it? Does it make you think like, oh, maybe I shouldn't travel?
Well, I think it's hard because a lot of people still have the idea that success equals career earnings. And like, that's like something that's still kind of like a bug in my head that, oh, I'm going to make 15% less maximum earnings because I was unemployed for a period of longer than 3 months in my 20s, even though I feel like I'm capable of not having that happen to me. I feel like I'm going to be a better person for traveling, but it's still like, oh, maybe I'm going to have a worse off life because of this decision to do something right now. So it's like, oh, I'm choosing happiness right now over choosing long-term stability, maybe long-term career crap.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really found important about this last trip we took, realizing that the idea that's a really common idea that it could be worse. It could be worse. Like, oh yeah, I'm kind of unhappy here, but it could be worse. Like, look at the guys dumpster diving. Look at the people without jobs. People would be happy to make as much money as you're making.
Yeah. It's so hard to like tell yourself that it's like, you can't live by those things. Like the concept of like, oh, you didn't finish all your food. Like starving kids in Africa would want that food. It's like, well,
no, but you need to
I would
choose.
love to feed starving kids in Africa, but like, I'm not going to stuff myself so that I'm uncomfortable.
And the same thing is with work too. Like you being unhappy isn't going to make other people who have shitty lives happier. It's just going to make another person who's unhappy, and that's going to make the people around you worse off. You know, it's your right to be happy. Like that's what you need to choose to do. We should always be happy.
For sure. And I think for me too, one thing I've really realized coming back this time is like, I can kind of pinpoint the point at work where I really was like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm ready to move on. And it was last summer, and I still worked there for 6 more months. And so not only is that not benefiting me personally, it's not benefiting my coworkers who I'm taking out my unhappiness on. It's not benefiting, the people that I'm, the job I'm doing, because I'm putting like very little effort into it because I just don't care. I think when people are unhappy in what they're doing, they need to get out. And there's always an excuse not to.
There's always rationalizations.
Yeah. Rationalization is a better word than excuse. There's always a reason that people can find, like, oh, but like I have a credit card bill to pay off. Like, oh, but I have car payments to make. Oh, but like my lease isn't up on my house.
And like, it'll be better in 6 months.
Yeah.
whatever.
Like I just need to push through this. Like I need to like do more yoga. Like I need an attitude adjustment. Like there's all those things, and society reinforces those things. Like it's pretty much like, okay, it's fine to just like live a life of like subpar happiness.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So, like, they teach you from, I don't know what age it starts at, but even like, so you start going to school and they're like, oh yeah, you have to learn this crap that you don't want to learn about, but when you get to university, you'll be better because you can choose what you want to learn about. And then you go to university and it's like, oh, like one day you'll be able to get a job and then you can feel like fulfilled and you'll have money and then you'll be happy and then you get a job. And it's like, okay, in 40 years, you'll have saved enough money to retire and then you can be happy. This idea of postponing happiness starts from a very early age and continues on. And the reality is that's not.
It's like, I don't
not
want
necessary.
to
You
find
can be
happiness
happy,
when I'm
yeah.
65. I want to find happiness when I'm 25 and I can run wild and free.
But traveling, isn't a long-term solution. Like you can't just go not work and travel for 8 months and then spend all your money and then have to come back and work something you don't like. But you can use that time where you have on your own to really, experience the wonder of the world, experience joy and happiness, and know none of the chronic stress you have in your day-to-day life, and then use that as a platform to realize that, hey, the reasons I'm not doing what I love at home are because I'm afraid of failing, or I'm afraid of what other people are going to think of me, or I keep associating with people who are killing my passion. Mm-hmm. And then you can learn a bunch of stuff and take home and apply that to really try to cultivate happiness on a day-to-day basis that is sustainable. And I'm not trying to say long-term travel isn't sustainable, because I think it is if you're working a certain way. But
for
even
most
non-sustainable
people,
long-term travel, I think, is a very healthy thing for people.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really a firm believer in not wanting to change things from the past, but at the same time, like I think that traveling right out of high school would have been so beneficial for me. Mm-hmm. Like I think my path would have been completely different. I don't think I would have gone to business school, to be honest with you.
Yeah, definitely. I've had the same thought while traveling. Just you're learning so much about dealing with life on your own, and it matures you so much. And I think about myself at 17, being in first year of university, and I think, wow, if I had been out in Peru or Colombia or even like Europe, somewhere like that, like somewhere just out on my own learning how to live,
like
I would have been so much
little.
better prepared to come back and deal with life.
For sure. And I think too, it's like, yeah, I think that I would suggest I think parents should be pushing kids to take a trip on their own, take a trip with a friend. Like it gets you out of that social circle that you're used to. It gets you meeting new people. It gets you seeing new things. Like
gets you making decisions
on your own without, your parents, your family, your friends in your ears all the time. You can really just be you. Like I find traveling is probably the only time that I've just been me.
Yeah.
It's like, fine, somebody, like, so for example, like my mom could send me an email being like, I don't think you should do this or go here. It's like, that's not your decision. Like I'm on the other side of the world. You don't get to choose that for me, Yeah.
And it's funny because people will think that you can use that at home, but people don't realize how much, when you're sitting there talking to someone, you have this desire, depending on who you are and how you were raised, this desire to please that person for a lot of people. So it's harder to say no to someone face to face than it is to just ignore their email.
Yeah. Or, delete a post off a Facebook wall, or, just ignore it, period. I think too, it's interesting because we did a trip, after university, which was, it's not the same as going after high school, but it is like a natural sort of time to do that. It's
common.
Yeah, it's common. But then we did something very different and, quit our jobs, sold our furniture. Like, I don't know. I think that was brave.
Yeah, there's a lot more, fear, anxiety about making that decision.
Yeah, it's like, what if we come back and there's like nowhere to live and no jobs and we're broke and we don't want to live in our parents' basements at 25?
Yeah.
But it's like at the same time, that's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
Yeah, me as well. I feel the same way. But that's the logic that it could be worse that we talked about earlier. That was like weighing in my head. Oh, like, what if I get back and it is worse? What am I going to do then?
But it's like, okay, so now that you're back, like, do you think that thought is crazy? Like,
yeah, no, absolutely. I'm afraid of so many things that I have the ability to not be afraid of, because I'm afraid of things that if they do happen, I can solve them. So why am I wasting my time being afraid of them?
for sure. I think, and this is my opinion, and I don't like to push my, if people disagree, but my opinion is if somebody's sitting out there in a job and they're feeling like physical, mental, emotional unrest from their job, stop doing it. Like, you're better than that.
Yeah.
Like, take a trip somewhere.
If the only reason you're there is because you're afraid it could be worse, like, that's not a reason. Especially a lot of people in our demographic, university educated, like, they have the ability to do things on their own. They can get other jobs, and beyond that, they could be economically viable without their jobs if they just start applying their skills that they have.
Yeah. And I mean, too, the thing is I was talking to somebody, like a friend of a friend who's our age, but she's bought a place in Calgary, and she's like, pardon?
Bought a home?
Yeah, condo. She was like, I'd really love to do what you and Ryan are doing, but like, I can't because I own a place now. What do you mean you can't? Sublet your apartment, Airbnb, rent it out. Like, you have options. There's never like a firm I can't. You're choosing not to. You're finding a reason not to. If you love your apartment and you love your job and you're truly happy, then that's fine.
Well, I don't want to is fine.
But it's like,
I can't. When you can, that's like,
I just think that people are like, I can't. I don't have somebody to go with.
Yeah.
Scare yourself. Go by yourself.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like
book a tour.
By traveling together, the two of us, it's been good. But I feel like when you're traveling by yourself, it is lonely, but that's a crazy beneficial experience.
Yeah. I think, though, like the first time we traveled, because I had just moved out of a house with 4 girlfriends who were my very best friends at the time. And I felt a little bit like lonely, like just there was a lot of things that I felt like I couldn't talk to you about, or that you didn't care about, or, I felt a little lonely from my girlfriends.
No, it's not. You're absolutely going to feel lonely.
I've realized now that it's not the same as traveling on your own. I'm not saying that it is the same, but I feel like even traveling with somebody, you do get lonely. And I'm sure, maybe 2 girls traveling together, one has a boyfriend at home. I'm sure she misses that person as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you feel sort of like homesick, lonely at some points, but it's good. It teaches you that you don't need those other people in your life.
Yeah.
It's fine if you want to see them, but you don't need them.
Yeah, you don't need. No.
On that note, what are your thoughts on traveling as a couple? Because I think that's sort of been an interesting experience for us.
Yeah, it's not uncommon, but not.
It's not uncommon, but it's not as common in, the way we travel in dorm rooms and hostels. We get a lot of like, you're dating and you're in an 8-person dorm. Like, that's weird. Do you even like each other?
Yeah, it's funny. Before, you'd hear a lot of people would say things like, you're going out traveling together. That's going to be hard. As if it's going to be hard to spend time with someone
that you apparently love.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a strange thing for people to say, but that's a fairly common thought. And it was like, we did get into disputes, arguments.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to sit here and be like, we're so perfect, we love each other so much, we never fight, I mean, that's a complete bold-faced lie. Mm-hmm. Like, there's sometimes where I want to kick you. And I know you feel the same about me. But I think, too, it's like you think about people who have been together for, I don't know, 25 years, married, and like they work, 10-hour days. How much time do they spend together?
Yeah, and beyond, so you're spending hardly any time with that person you care about. And you're also spending not quality time. People come home from work, sit down, grab a beer, and turn on the TV.
Yeah.
So it's like you're spending time with it, like you're in the physical vicinity of that person. That's what spending time is. But, you know, how many hours a week are you actually present with that person?
Yeah. And I think that's too, like, we really got sucked into that vortex when we were working. Like, how much quality conversation did we have? We saw each other every single night. How much quality conversation did we have? Like none?
No, I mean,
1% of the time we had quality conversation.
There's like stress that people realize they're stressed out about. And then I think that stress just kind of overwhelms you after a while. That's what I felt like for me. Like I needed to go, not needed, but like wasn't using my brain, didn't feel good about myself, wasn't getting fulfilled at work. So I'd come home and I'd just need to tune out. I need to be distracted, because to not be distracted was to have the potential of like thinking about how unhappy I was with my life.
For sure.
And I think people, when you're unhappy with your life, you take it out on the people you care about, or you find people who care about, who you allow you to take things out on them. And those are just unhealthy people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of wraps up our episode 0 philosophy on travel discussion.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
Not really. Do you have anything else?
No, I think we covered pretty much. Well, I mean, yes, there's lots of things in my brain about travel, philosophy of travel. Travel is a lifestyle.
Yeah, I think we could talk about traveling
I could talk for hours.
Yeah.
But
so that's what the podcast going forward is going to be. Not specifically like this. We're going to go through our trips. We're going to take you to the places that we've been, what we liked about it. And then beyond that, we're not just going to give you the guidebook things. Like we're going to do the things we liked, why we liked them, things we learned along the way of how to travel more effectively and efficiently. And then the things we learned about ourselves, the things we learned about life.
Yeah.
So
that sums up the weeks and years to come.
So next week, we're taking our podcast time machine back to June 2011, and we're going to go to Iceland.
Iceland, woo!
For more information about what we talked about today, you can check out the show notes on our blog, theworldwanderers.com, or you can look up Amanda's blog.
It is amandakingsmith.com. That's King and a Smith, all one word. Our blog is currently just getting up and running, so there's a little bit more travel information on my blog right now.
Yeah,
if you want to get ahead of the game and read all about South America, everything's up on there. Photos and everything. So check us out.
Yeah, until next time.